follow the steps, it seems kind of inevitable how it occurred, because after World War II, you had two giant powers and a bunch of pawns, if you will, consisting of Europe and some other areas. And so as the sides are trying to gather control, the Soviets are taking over little satellite countries, and the United States is trying to build our influence. Well, normally, that would have brought about World War III. But in the age of crazy, insane weaponry, another war was kind of out of the question. And so how do you have these two opposing forces do warlike things without actually coming to blows? And it was just really fascinating. What was the second part of the question again? I forgot.
Like when
MAD, I'm sure you guys have heard, mutually assured destruction. And it was kind of an interesting theory, and it strikes you as crazy when you hear it the first time. But you also can't deny that it did arguably result in not having a war. Well, it was a very interesting experience growing up during the Cold War, because you were cognizant of the fact that you always had an enemy, like literally pointing zillions of megatons at you at all times. And as kids, we were sort of oblivious to that, but it would come up every now and then. So I grew up in the environment where I'd heard of these events that freak people out totally. And so, well, it was, like I keep saying, a very strange time with a very strange set of circumstances. And I remember some of my college classmates were totally oblivious to the whole concept, that there was this standoff of unimaginable weaponry that could go off at the drop of a hat. Were absolutely stunned, shocked, and amazed, and they thought that some thought it was the end of the world, which, of course, it came close to being. I think the Cold War ended. It's debatable, but the way I would say was pretty much when Gorbachev came to power, and the Soviet Union was getting tired, I think, of just not having much money and not having much success, and that people suffered under a much poorer standard of living than the free world. And they were tired of that. We were tired of having huge weapons pointed at us. And President Reagan, I think, made a bet that he could outspend the Soviets. And the Soviet economy could certainly not keep building up massive military indefinitely, whereas we could, and we did. And a lot of people think that President Reagan simply spent the Soviet Unions into the ground. And at a certain point, they said, we can't match your armaments any longer. We just can't keep this up. And so they had to find a different way of resolving their differences. And so they began doing things like arms control.